Okay, so Sol Campbell, the new man in at Southend, and if he was under any illusions about the job that was facing him, I think that was, sat in the stands watching a 7-1 home defeat to Doncaster should put him in the picture. And it's a very similar job to the one he took on at Macclesfield last season. They were cut adrift at the time and looking, like pretty much solid bet for relegation. And there had been signs of improvement under caretaker management under Danny Whitaker, and it's a similar story at Southend. And Gary Waddock's come in; he's done an admirable job under really trying circumstances, and basically just shown some signs of life that they can compete from time to time at this level. But ultimately, I think it's going to be a relegation battle. I think that's the first thing to establish, is that this Southend team now, the journey that it's been on and the players that it's got over the past 12 months or so are not good enough anymore to stay at League One. So something has to change. Campbell managed to get those changes at Macclesfield last season. So how he did it and how he can do it now with Southend, I guess, is what we're most interested in. I think the first thing to say is that Campbell strikes me as very much a training ground manager, tracksuit manager. Likes to get on the grass, during the week. It sounded like last season at Macclesfield he spent an awful lot of time with his players, not necessarily developing personal relationships, but basically just spent a lot of time with them, coaching them, being around them being relaxed around him, and just as the season wore on, they became very comfortable in the way that they were playing, which is to say, I don't think he made a dramatic overhaul in terms of performance data. I don't think he'd have looked at the performance data and thought, that there was some massive turnaround at Macclesfield, because, there was nothing spectacular about their XG ratio or anything like that from before he arrived or, after, in the second half of the season. Enough to be competitive, but not what you'd expect to be a dramatic turnaround. So what did seem to happen at Macclesfield is that the players seemed to be very relaxed. Given the fact that they were having difficulties getting paid and that they were looking like sure things for relegation. At no stage did they look like a team that was involved in a dogfight. They were just going about the business nice and relaxed every week. And I think a lot of that came down to Campbell's managerial style, and I think that he had a real good capacity to reassure players, and what had gone before had gone, and it was nothing was ever dwelt on. Defeats were forgotten very quickly, move on to the next game, and it was just about creating a day-to-day environment. I think it was just about knuckling down on the training ground and then trying to put things down on a match day, try and bring all the things you'd been working on, try to bring it onto the pitch on a match day. So I think that's something we can expect with Southend this season now, is that what's happened has happened, it's gone. We do start with a team that's not good enough for the division, it would appear. And there is a lot of mental baggage there, potentially, if it was with a manager that wasn't going to wipe the slate clean and put that behind them. So I think it's a good appointment in that regard straight away. It's just the complete mental reset, I think, is what's needed. I don't think it's going to be, he's going to be a manager that rallies them or anything like that. I just think it's a case of always being in the moment and not dwelling on what's gone before and not looking too far ahead of themselves. Just, it's a day-to-day process of this, all this hard work on the training ground and then bringing it to a pitch on a match day. And nothing else really matters. There's no sense of past or future. And what else struck me about his time at Macclesfield was that he seemed to be a manager that enjoyed the wheeling and dealing in the transfer market. And he did manage to attract some players to Macclesfield that ordinarily you wouldn't have expected to end up there. Which is not to say that they were fantastic players, or he brought in some incredible talent that Macclesfield had no right to get. There was nothing like that. It was just the sense that the reach was further. I think he's got a lot of good contacts in the game. He's familiar with a lot of agents and things like that. You know, he was shopping for players in Scotland and academy players. There's a real mix of, you know, players that were that went to the Moss Rose that you would just not have normally associated with, you know, with making those types of moves. And you'd think that they made those moves because of Campbell. That, you know, any geographical concerns or those little minor sort of things that put players off making this sort of move, Campbell negated them. They wanted to go and see what Sol Campbell was all about, what he could do for them, a player that had, you know, played at the very highest level, had all this wealth of experience, you know, and played at the very top of the game. So I think, you know, from a recruitment perspective, it's an interesting signing. I think he can bring in new players. There's a lot of turnover in January last season at Macclesfield, and I would expect the same again. Because I think, you know, like I say, the players he inherits now at Southend, you have to have serious reservations about their ability to get themselves out of trouble. So I think it will need freshening up, and I think he will freshen it up from that side of things, and just bring in some, you know, some wild card signings really, just to change the dynamic and just to, you know, keep players on the toes and give himself a few more options and a bit more variety about the way that games can be approached. And you know, I think generally it's just a reset, and I think if you can repeat, as it stands here now today, you have to say that Southend look like a side that are going down, and I think you probably would have said the same about Macclesfield when he went in last December. So if you can repeat the same trick and do the same thing again, then you'd have to say, yeah, he's got something. You know, you know, they're not going to be working to a grand plan. It can feel a little bit hit and miss, his managerial style. I wouldn't honestly hang my hat on what he did at Macclesfield last season and say, yeah, he's going to do the same thing all over again. Because in different conditions, different circumstances, different environment, he can try to go about things the same way and it just won't work. But yeah, I do think if this will be an acid test in that regard. If he can go and repeat the trick of what he did at Macclesfield and do it again now a division higher, then you'd have to say, yeah, this isn't coincidence, he's definitely got something. So it's going to be an interesting season to see if Campbell can have a similar impact. And, you know, it's one I'll certainly be keeping an interest in.